Russia-Ukraine War. The Russia-Ukraine War began on February 24, 2022, when Russia launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. This war has drawn significant international attention and has had widespread political, economic, and humanitarian impact. Here, we will explain the background of the war, key events, international reactions, and the effects of the war in simple terms. 1. Background of the war. 1.1 Historical background. Russia and Ukraine have a long history of cultural and historical connections. Both countries were part of the Soviet Union and became independent nations after its collapse in 1991. 1.2 The annexation of Crimea in 2014. In 2014, Russia forcibly annexed Crimea from Ukraine. This event drew strong condemnation and sanctions from the international community. The annexation of Crimea showed that Russia was willing to use force to pursue its interests, disregarding international agreements on Ukraine's territorial integrity. 1.3 Tensions with NATO. Since 2014, Ukraine has increased its cooperation with NATO North Atlantic Treaty Organization as part of its efforts to integrate with the West. NATO is a military alliance for collective defense, and Russia viewed NATO's eastward expansion as a direct threat to its security. 2. Outbreak and key events of the war. 2.1 Russia's invasion in 2022. On February 24, 2022, Russia launched a special military operation by invading Ukraine. Russian President Vladimir Putin claimed the operation aimed to demilitarize and denazify Ukraine, but in reality, it was an act of aggression against Ukraine's sovereignty and territory. Russia's initial goal was to quickly capture major cities, including Kiev, and establish a pro-Russian government. By doing so, Russia aimed to bring Ukraine back into its sphere of influence and halt NATO's eastward expansion. 2.2 Early stages of the war. In the early stages of the war, Russia attempted to encircle major cities such as Kiev and Kharkiv. Kiev, as Ukraine's capital and political center, was a primary target for Russia's rapid conquest strategy. 2.3 Fall of Mariupol. The strategic southern city of Mariupol fell to Russian forces in May 2022 after intense fighting. Mariupol, located on the Sea of Azov, was a crucial port city with strategic importance as it connected Crimea with the Donbas region. 2.4 Battles in Kharkiv and Kherson. Intense fighting also occurred in the Kharkiv and Kherson regions. Kharkiv, a major city in northeastern Ukraine, near the Russian border, held strategic importance. In the initial invasion, Russian forces aimed to capture Kharkiv swiftly, but they faced strong resistance from Ukrainian troops. Ukrainian forces engaged in fierce urban combat, successfully repelling Russian advances. By autumn 2022, they had recaptured most of the Kharkiv region, halting Russia's progress. 3. International reactions. 3.1 Sanctions and support from the West. Western countries strongly condemned Russia's invasion and quickly imposed a range of economic sanctions. The United States, the European Union, the United Kingdom, and other Western nations targeted Russia's major banks, energy companies, and high-ranking officials with these sanctions. The aim was to pressure Russia's economy and cut off funding for the war. The EU included Russia's central bank and key financial institutions on its sanctions list, isolating Russia from the global financial system. The EU restricted imports of Russian oil and gas and halted transactions with Russian businesses. The UK froze Russian assets and ended cooperation with Russian companies. In addition to sanctions, Western countries significantly increased military and economic aid to Ukraine. The EU provided large-scale military assistance, including advanced weapon systems, equipment, and training. This support greatly enhanced the combat capabilities of Ukrainian forces. The EU also offered financial aid and military equipment to help Ukraine sustain its defense. Major European countries like Germany, France, and Italy supplied weapons to Ukraine and provided humanitarian aid to address the crisis. They offered food, medical supplies, and temporary shelter to Ukrainian refugees, aiming to alleviate the war's humanitarian impact. NATO member countries also supported Ukraine. While NATO did not engage in direct military intervention, it facilitated weapons, training, and intelligence support through its member states. NATO strengthened the defense posture of Eastern European member countries to deter further Russian aggression. These measures aim to bolster the security of Eastern European nations and curb Russian military actions. The collective sanctions and support from the West played a crucial role in countering Russia's invasion and reinforcing Ukraine's resistance. The economic sanctions inflicted significant damage on Russia's economy, weakening its war effort. At the same time, military support enabled Ukrainian forces to effectively combat Russian troops. Despite these measures, the war continued, prompting Western countries to explore additional sanctions and support strategies. The West's firm response to Russia's invasion sent a strong message to the international community, impacting the future of global order and security dynamics. 3.2 NATO's role. NATO played a significant role in supporting Ukraine during the Russia-Ukraine war, despite not directly intervening militarily. NATO provided crucial assistance through its member countries, offering various forms of military and intelligence support. which were vital in Ukraine's defense against the Russian invasion. Weapon support. NATO member countries supplied extensive military aid to Ukraine. Key members such as the United States, the United Kingdom, Germany, and Canada provided advanced weapon systems and equipment. This included anti-tank missiles, air defense systems, drones, and small arms. These supplies were essential for Ukraine to effectively defend against Russian attacks and organize counteroffensives. Military training. NATO also enhanced military training for Ukrainian forces. Member countries invited Ukrainian soldiers to their territories for training on modern tactics, equipment use, and command systems. The UK, through Operation ORBITAL, and Canada, through Operation UNIFIER, provided combat skills and strategic training. These programs improved the combat readiness and defensive capabilities of Ukrainian troops. Intelligence support. NATO provided significant intelligence support to Ukraine. NATO intelligence agencies and member countries shared real-time information on Russian military movements, strategies, and tactics with Ukraine. This included satellite imagery, reconnaissance drone data, and cyber intelligence, crucial for Ukraine to anticipate and counter Russian operations effectively, strengthening Eastern European defense. NATO focused on reinforcing the defense posture of its Eastern European members to deter further Russian aggression. Countries like Poland, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia received additional NATO troops, enhancing their defense capabilities. NATO's enhanced forward presence strategy deployed multinational battle groups to these countries, significantly boosting their security, military exercises, and infrastructure. NATO conducted large-scale military exercises with Eastern European countries to improve defense capabilities. Exercises like Defender Europe, Baltops, and Steadfast Defender were regularly held, enhancing cooperation and interoperability among NATO members. These exercises prepared NATO forces for rapid response to potential threats. NATO also invested in upgrading military infrastructure in Eastern Europe. Air bases, naval facilities, air defense systems, and electronic warfare capabilities were modernized and expanded. The deployment of the advanced Patriot missile defense system in Poland and Romania significantly enhanced their defensive capabilities against Russian missile threats. In summary, NATO's support through weapon supplies, military training, intelligence sharing, and strengthening Eastern European defenses played a crucial role in bolstering Ukraine's resistance and deterring further Russian aggression. NATO's efforts were instrumental in curbing Russia's military expansion and ensuring the security of Eastern European member states. 3.3 Non-aligned countries' positions. Non-aligned countries generally maintained a neutral stance, but as the war continued, many clarified their positions. Initially, countries like China and India adopted a relatively neutral approach, but over time, they increasingly engaged in economic cooperation with Russia. 4. Humanitarian crisis. 4.1 Refugee crisis. The war forced millions of Ukrainians to flee their homes, seeking refuge within and outside the country. According to the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees UNHCR, over 10 million Ukrainians became refugees by mid-2023, marking the largest refugee crisis in Europe since World War II. European countries made significant efforts to accommodate and support these refugees. 4.2 Civilian casualties. The war inflicted severe civilian casualties and destruction. Numerous cities were devastated, leading to a sharp increase in civilian deaths and injuries. Conclusion. The Russia-Ukraine war is a major conflict, drawing significant international attention. This war, driven by historical, political, and economic factors, has drastically altered the global order. It has caused severe humanitarian crises and economic instability, not only in Ukraine and Russia, but globally. The long-term outlook for the war remains uncertain, but ongoing international support and diplomatic efforts are crucial for restoring peace and stability.
Moving on to other global stories. As the Russia-Ukraine war rages on, new reports suggest that the US has given Ukraine permission to strike inside Russian territories near Kharkiv, using Washington's munitions, that is. The move is expected to better help Ukraine in defending its second largest city of Kharkiv. US officials have maintained that the policy over not launching long-range strikes inside Russia remains unchanged. They added that Ukraine cannot use those weapons to hit civilian infrastructure or launch missiles like the tactical missile system to hit military targets deep inside Russia. The shift comes as US allies, including the UK and France, said that Ukraine should have the right to attack inside Russia using Western weapons. A Russian strike in the eastern city of Kharkiv has killed at least 3 people, while injuring 16 others. And this is as per the regional governor. Russia used twin strikes which targeted medics and rescue workers. Meanwhile, NATO Secretary Jens Stoltenberg has urged continued support from alliance members. Also, during Friday's NATO meeting in Prague, Stoltenberg also demanded a multi-year financial commitment for Ukraine. The Secretary General also asked allies to pledge $43.37 billion annually to fund military aid for Ukraine. Zelensky has also said that new agreements on drones and air defense are in the talks.
Буде найближчим часом багато комунікацій.
We are thoroughly planning the negotiations, meetings of our representatives, and the content of the documents. This includes defense packages for Ukraine, new security agreements, and the peace summit.
Інвестицій у такі виробництва.
Separately, the World Bank has warned that the number of Ukrainians living in poverty has grown by 1.8 million since 2020. World Bank has alerted the situation is slated to worsen if Kyiv does not receive foreign funding, especially for welfare involving old age pensions and salaries. To talk more on this, we're now being joined by Lieutenant Colonel Daniel L. Davis. He's a military expert and host of Daniel Davis Deep Dive on YouTube. Welcome to the show, Colonel. And first, I'll ask you that U.S. has finally given permission to strike inside Russian territories. After yesterday, we saw that Washington was adamant on not allowing Ukraine to use Western-supplied munitions. What triggered this change in U.S. policy?
Well, at least according to what's being reported, it's limited permission and only right now targeted in the area north of Kharkiv, where the Russians are conducting operations in the northern part of that country. Apparently, it's not a blanket release. It's not allowing them to just use whatever the Ukraine side wants to fire wherever inside of Russia. There are allegedly some limits to it. But look, I mean, anytime you start going down the path, it's almost impossible to say that they're going to prevent it, or that if Ukraine uses it elsewhere besides what we've authorized it, we're going to hold weapons back. So, I mean, that seems pretty unlikely to me. And you see all kinds of other Westerners saying, yes, let's allow all of the weapons to be used everywhere in Russia. But here's the problem with that. They don't seem to recognize that there's a cost to doing this. Russia's not just going to allow that to happen and literally take no action. So the West needs to be prepared for a response of some kind. And so far, every time something like that has happened inside of Russia, Russia responds back to something else inside of Ukraine. So we need to be careful that this is not a cost-free operation.
Colonel Davis, you speak of how this reversal is a limited policy related to Kharkiv rather than a broader shift in policy. You're a military expert yourself. Talk to us about if this shift by Washington, what kind of impact will it have on ground as Ukraine fights with Russia?
Won't have any impact at all. It'll have some marginal, depending on what's fired and how much, especially up in that area on the northern side of the border, where maybe some of the Russian forces are trying to amass, or where some of their artillery systems are. It's unclear what weapon systems they're talking about that they're going to use that they're not already using. But you see that when you're talking about this scope of a 70-kilometer front in the Kharkiv area, 600 miles, in the eastern part, this is going to be relatively minor because the Ukraine side is still outgunned 5 or 10 to 1, depending on where in the front you're talking about. And then, of course, the Ukraine side still has inadequate air defenses. So the Russia's aerial bombs, those glide bombs have coming in from their weapon systems. So none of those things have been changed. So it's not going to have any material effect on the fighting at all.
Colonel Davis, Putin had earlier warned the West, saying that the NATO members were playing with fire with such proposals, and now the green light from the United States of America. Do you see this sparking the risk of a broader conflict, and what kind of a response can we expect from Russia?
Well, look, we need to take that very seriously. That's I've been seeing a lot of increasing proponents from the West especially say, oh, we're self-deterring. We should not listen to any more to that. I've heard a lot of that in recent days, that we should never, ever worry about any Russian red lines. And that's foolish because, look, Russia has a number of red lines have been passed, and there weren't any catastrophic responses. But nearly every time something has happened to escalate into Russia, Russia has hit back hard against the Ukraine side. This just doesn't get covered much by the West. But if we start hitting more and more targets inside of Russia, then they will probably start hitting more targets inside of Ukraine. They will expand their target list. And despite what some realize, the Russians have been relatively constrained on their target list. And if they start expanding that to other targets, especially into Kiev perhaps, or into some of the other cities on targets beyond just the purely military ones, this could hurt a lot for the Ukraine side. So that's why I said a minute ago, this is not a cost-free operation, and people need to understand there could be a significant response from the Russian side.
Right, Colonel Davis, thank you so much for joining us on the show with your insights.
My pleasure. Thank you.